invite Dr. Suziana Shukor, Corporate Learning and Development Advisor at the London Camden Council. Dr. Suziana's area of expertise are on digital learning and e-learning development to support an organization's new way of working to achieve effectiveness and efficacy, particularly in the current financial challenges where the public sector must learn to do more with less. Outside work, Dr. Suziana Shukor has also set up a virtual school for Muslims in the West, ehsanlearning.com. She has also set up an online learning, learntera.com, introducing courses designed from a systems thinking perspective to support NGOs and public sector organizational learning to achieve sustainable effectiveness and efficiency from end to end. Today, Dr. Suziana will be presenting on a virtual school, innovation in delivering education. Dr. Suziana.
Assalamualaikum, and thank you for coming here, and thank you HLAF for inviting me to this event. I'm very happy to be here today to talk and learn from other participants and audiences on education and innovation. For today's presentation, I want to tell you my personal stories about virtual schools and some of their impacts. This is my first story. This is my first story. Education has been my passion ever since I was small. I don't know exactly how and why it began. Perhaps it began with my late father buying me Time magazine quite regularly, starting when I was just 13 years old, despite his extremely small salary. And Time magazine wasn't cheap then, and it is still too expensive for me now. I can't remember all that I've read, and I certainly didn't even understand most of the stuffs written in there. But until today, I can remember very vividly how I cried when I read about the Sabra and Shatila camps tragedy. What struck me then wasn't the tragedy that happened there itself, although it was awful beyond words. Rather, it was about how those kids did not have the opportunities to go to school like I did. Perhaps that was the catalyst that sparked my early passion for education. 7 years ago, I decided to leave the academic world after completing my PhD and to continue living in the UK. And yet I wasn't sure what exactly I wanted to do, so I jumped from one job to another, from one sector to another, much to my family's despair. And then in 2011, I joined an international NGO where I first learned about the power of virtual schools. Part of my job at this NGO was to develop e-learning courses for over 3,000 staff working and living in 26 countries. It was a nightmare. Not only I had to take a huge pay cut when I first joined in, but I also couldn't even design a decent PowerPoint slide, let alone an e-learning course. Looking back now, I can say that deciding to be a learning and technologist enthusiast and a learning and development practitioner was the best decision I've ever made in my professional life. As a learning technologist and e-learning developer, I learned about user interface, designs, learning platforms, learning technologies, capabilities, functions, and their limitations. And as a learning and development practitioner, I learned to conduct learning needs assessments and to identify different learning styles. But more importantly, I learned about engaging with staff living and working in some of the poorest countries in the world, in Haiti, Mali, Sudan, Bangladesh, Albania, Kosovo. I also learned to conduct online conferences with staff from different geographical areas with different time zones. This was a turning point for me. In one of the e-conferences which I organized, One of my colleagues from Haiti had to walk 5 miles to the office. He had no internet at home, and thus no public transport at 5 o'clock in the morning there. But when I came into the virtual conference room, I found more than 20 colleagues from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Bosnia, and Indonesia were already in the room, in the virtual room, for more than 1 hour. I asked them, why did you guys come so early? They said they didn't want to miss the conference because they enjoyed talking with other colleagues across the globe. My job as a learning technologist has also introduced me to various virtual schools. You have lynda.com, you have W3 School, Open Sesame, various types of MOOCs, YouTube, and eCornell. eCornell is a virtual school owned by Cornell University. The NGO I work for is a member of a learning consortium which entitled us to a 96% discount. So we paid $45 for one module for one person. One of the most dedicated staff who's absolutely love virtual schools is a young guy from Mali. Mali is one of the world's poorest countries, and so you can imagine the level of education there. He worked as a support person, but he went on to complete more than 20 e-learning modules offered by eCornell in several months, achieving 2 master's certificates. I asked him, how on earth did you manage to do this? He told me that he studied until late nights after work and through the weekends. He said he wanted to be a learning junkie. Sorry, press next. That's what he wanted to be. He wanted to be a learning junkie. That was in 2012. In August 2014, he competed against 12,000 people to join the UN Summer School in New York. He won a place. He came back and later on became a monitoring officer. Now he is a UN officer in Central Africa, managing and developing UN volunteers there. From him, I learned that if you are a learning junkie or wish to be one, then virtual schools are a good choice for you. We have many virtual schools on the internet, but the internet itself is one gigantic virtual school which is blind to color, gender, religion, race, and nationality. This is my next story. This is about another young man, but this time from Bangladesh. He worked for me as a freelance web designer. When I first contracted him in 2013, he has very little background in design. He has some technical backgrounds, but not much of working experience. I said to myself, what the heck? I got to take this risk, so I hired him. I asked him to produce some PowerPoint slides for me. I thought the level of quality he produced, even my 9-year-old daughter could do it better. However, when I asked him to produce a different set of PowerPoint slides, he obliged without a single word. He kept on producing different sets of the slides, and at the same time, he's learning from virtual schools like lynda.com and SW3, until I said to him, let's see this together. We look at his first work, and compared those to his latest submission. Now remember that all these conversations took place via Skype. When we look at his works, there's a huge difference before and after. So I told him, you can only do better from now. He continued building 2 websites, which later on became 2 very small virtual schools for me. The turning point happened when both my websites were hacked to pieces. I was completely flustered. But the moment he said to me, take a break, I'll sort this out, that was when I thought, let's see if I have another learning junkie here. He scoured the internet for solutions and worked straight 28 hours to bring the websites up. He contacted people on the internet, contacted help desk, asking them how to solve hacking problems and how to put up better firewall and backups. To be honest, the contents were actually safe. I have the content saved in 3 different places. But it was fascinating to observe how he learned to navigate his way through the giant virtual school, which is the internet itself. I remember once he told me that he wanted to migrate to another country. He said he's fed up with Bangladesh. I said, it's not that you're fed up with Bangladesh, but the life you're trapped in. And that can be anywhere in the world. As a major breadwinner, he admitted that he's struggling. He said he has no confidence in talking to people, let alone to market his skills, products, and services. But when my websites went down, that was exactly what he did. When he engaged with many open forums, chatting with strangers from different countries on the internet, who were more than happy to help him to get my websites up and running again. Early this year, he Skyped to let me know that he had a 6-month contract with one of the web design firms in the US. I asked him, how did he do it? And he said he joined LinkedIn and he just contacted them straight away. And now the contract has been extended. 2 months ago, he Skyped to let me know that he's saving money to buy a better house for himself and his family, and that he wanted to set up a virtual school for disadvantaged kids in Bangladesh. He's also mentoring and coaching fresh web designers and data entry workers in Bangladesh. Isn't it fantastic? So that's what it takes to be a learning junkie. And also the aha moment I've got there. Now, in this final story number 3. It seems almost inevitable that I should start my own virtual school. I have to experience it myself, not as the end user of virtual schools, but this time to be the one who can offer digital learning through virtual schools. As a mother, often the best inspiration comes from the kids themselves. Living in the UK has made it very difficult for my younger children to learn about their faith. I've paid for online classrooms for them to learn reading the Quran in Arabic, but I wasn't entirely satisfied. So I set out to develop my own e-learning courses. The journey was not easy because my knowledge in learning technology was and is still limited. I had to copy every letter from the hard copy text from the Iqra books there, and authored the e-learning course using Articulate Storyline. Before that, I bought a Mac computer, but only to discover that the authoring tool software could not run in Mac directly. I also found that some of the signs and symbols in the hard copy text are not available on the regular Arabic keyboard, so I had to draw them. My daughter helped me with it. Next was to figure out how I could turn this e-learning course to be interactive and self-guided. The whole process of hyperlinking, editing, branching, recording, designing, and reviewing the courses has helped me to understand about e-learning, its capabilities as well as limitations. Virtual schools through SCOM e-learning courses, e-books, videos, webinars, and open forums have all helped me to realize what great opportunities are out there. So many gaps in the existing education system can be closed even as a temporary measure. I started ASAN Learning in 2012 with the intention to support my children's learning. Now I'm thinking, if I can develop these courses, I can also develop other courses. For example, English as an international language, which my eldest daughter is currently working on. She comes from a computer engineering background, and she's decided to have a career change. She now works as an e-learning developer for one of the UK's top companies with over 40,000 employees. Imagine, with one e-learning course or module, 40,000 employees can access it simultaneously. In the same way, SN Learning can offer the same contents to over millions of Muslims living in places where access to teachers can be a big issue. At least that's my dream. I have not made any hard launch of SN Learning, but several times the website went down due to heavy traffic since I first set it up 3 years ago. E-learning courses from SN Learning are now downloadable to the iPad, which means people can review them offline without the internet connection after they have downloaded the contents. This has reduced traffic considerably, something that I really want, because server is expensive. It is not my ambition to be big. That's not important to me. I just want to teach and coach those who are close to me, and found that virtual schools are very useful in that sense. Finally, and certainly it's not least, what I can say about virtual schools is that it changes the way we view education. Education is no longer about choking on information and spitting it out through endless exams as the only measurement of success. Virtual schools have widened the participation in learning. It's more inclusive. We get to choose learning that matters to us and when we want it. In virtual schools, there are no dropouts. There are no failures. If we, as teachers, educators, policymakers, educationists, and parents, cannot accept that, perhaps we are the actual failures, because we fail to understand the changing needs and the ways of learning in this century. Okay, this is just an example. Someone, I think, mentioned earlier on that learning now needs to be more engaging, needs to be more interactive, and there's a new concept of gamification in learning. I think this is, we are moving towards that direction, and certainly as a learning technologies at Camden, I'm moving Camden into that direction as well. So there's a whole lot of difference if all your senses are learning together rather than just one-dimensional, looking at the textbooks, papers, and then try to remember everything there. So you're supposed to have an audio there. So there's no audio, that's fine. But if you click on the audio, you should hear the word think. So that's just an example how a rapid e-learning, it takes about, I think it took about two days to develop something like that with all the motion path. You don't have to use Flash, you just use articulate storyline, and then it's very simple. It's a very, very simple tool to do. So it's doable. I think that's it from me. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Suziana. Any questions from Dr. Suziana? Participants, please introduce yourself, your name and where you're from before asking a question. Doctor, I have a question.
Oh, you have a question.
Yes.
Okay, fine.
Okay. With virtual learning, how do we develop character? How do we develop soft skills? Because once you're in the virtual world, your school, I might say, is if it's you in a room in front of a monitor, and going to school, going to college, going to university is an experience by itself. So how do we mitigate this?
If you listen to story number 2, I lived in the UK, and this guy lived in Bangladesh. and he connected with the rest of the world on open forums. And he actually motivated himself to work on the websites. The whole idea, I think, about how do we this and that is actually incorporated and embedded together. It's not very, I suppose in L&D or learning and development world, we call it a double loop learning. Whereby double loop learning, it goes beyond your textbooks, it goes beyond what you hear from your teachers. So it involves informal learning, it involves social learning as well, and all this is part of the characters building. So there is no specific saying that how, what kind of curriculum, what kind of course that we should develop for behavior. You probably have behavior framework. I think certainly in the UK, in the context of human resource or resourcing and recruitment, we are moving towards behavioral framework. But there are what you call is indicators, strong indicators, how you demonstrate those behaviors. So to answer to your question, how do you build these characters? It depends on, again, how alone, how exclusive you are, because even though you are on online or virtual schools, you're not alone, actually. You have your peers. Does it answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Thank you, Doctor. Our third speaker for today is Professor Lim Cherping from the Hong Kong Institute of Education. Professor Lim is